Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I'm going to be talking about series that I am just not going to finish. I have read a lot of books in my life, and I hope to read a lot more. And you know how many series I've already finished if you watched my video about series that I've finished completely. If you haven't, then I will put a link to that somewhere so you can go see it. But now I'm going to be talking about series that I just have not enjoyed enough to continue forward. This can be a book where I read the first book and just decided it wasn't worth it, or a book that I read a lot of books in the series before I finally decided it wasn't worth my time to continue anymore. Overall, in a number that sort of makes me sad, I actually have 39 series that I have at some point started and I don't plan on picking up again. So let's just hurry and go through those. I'll try to give you kind of a reason why, but I have 39 to get through, so who knows how much detail I can really go into. So the first series that I don't think I'm going to be finishing is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series by Douglas Adams. I read the first book of this series and I really enjoyed it, but it is just not the kind of book that I think I would want to continue on and read more of the books in that series. The next book on my list is the Peter and the Starcatchers series by Dave Barry and Ridley Pearson. This is a middle grade retelling of Peter Pan, sort of. It all takes place long before Peter Pan. It's like an origin story. I read the first two books in this series. I think there are like 4 or 5 now. And after the first two, I really enjoyed it, but there just wasn't a point in continuing forward. This first book is amazing, but it's just not going to be a series that I'm finishing. The next series I won't be finishing is the Gemma Doyle Trilogy by Libba Bray. I know. A lot of people on BookTube love this series, but while I liked the first book, and I really did like the second book, I've tried multiple times to read the third book, A Sweet Far Thing, and I have just never been able to get through it. The next series on my list is the Molly Moon series by Georgia Bing. This is a middle grade series that I used to really enjoy, and I read the first 4 books in the series, but then I just sort of grew out of them, and I don't really want to go back and reread the first 4, and so I won't be reading any more in the series. The next series that I don't plan on reading any more of is the Ender's Game series, or possibly the Ender Quintet is possibly what it's called. I read the first book, Ender's Game, in high school, and I liked it, but I didn't love it, and certainly did not love it enough to continue and read more books in the series. The next series that I won't be finishing is the Jurassic Park series by Michael Crichton. I did not really like this book, unfortunately, when I picked it up, and I definitely had no more interest in reading any more books in the series. The next series that I want to mention is The Circle books by Ted Dekker. I'm sure that this might be a surprise to some people if you watched my TBR this month, because it was my plan to read Green and finish the series. However, I've read about 100 pages of this so far, and I am not enjoying it at all. I don't think it has any of the stuff that I enjoyed in the first 3 books, and after reading reviews, I have heard that if I liked the original 3, I should just throw this book right out because it will ruin what I loved about the other books. So I've decided that I'm just going to put this book away and be happy with the 3 that I've read. Going along that line, the next series I won't be finishing is The Lost books, also by Ted Dekker. This is a series that takes place in the Colored Forest of the Circle series. It's a spin-off series, and reading 6 books about the Colored Forest is not something I want to do. I read the first book and it just did not intrigue me enough to continue. The next series I won't be finishing is the Dark Divine series by Brie Despain. I never really intended on reading this series, and then I went to a Young Writers Conference and Brie Despain was teaching one of the workshops, and I ended up getting the Dark Divine signed. This is a young adult paranormal romance series, very much in the vein of Twilight, and the first book was just definitely not good enough for me to continue on and read the other books. I will also not be finishing the Hush Hush series by Becca Fitzpatrick. I read the first 2 books in this series that is also a paranormal romance, and I had a lot of issues with this series that I feel like the romance was very, very, very questionable, and I just decided I did not want to continue reading them. I also will not be finishing the Caster Chronicles by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. I read Beautiful Creatures and the second book, Beautiful Darkness, and while I really liked Beautiful Creatures, I did not like Beautiful Darkness at all, and I heard that after that they just pretty much got repetitive, and so I decided that I'm just going to be leaving beautiful darkness and beautiful creatures alone in a corner and not thinking about the rest. I am not going to continue reading The Missing by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This was a series that I read in junior high and high school that I really, really enjoyed, but I don't see myself picking up again. Also by Margaret Peterson Haddix, I won't be continuing the Shadow Children series by her. This is sort of a dystopian sci-fi series that again was very good, but not good enough for me to pick up all the books again and reread them to continue. I won't be continuing to read the Enemy series by Charlie Higson. This is a zombie thriller series, and I just have a history of not really being able to get into zombie books, and this was just one of those books on the long line of me discovering that I can't really read books about zombies, so I didn't enjoy this book and decided not to pick up the rest. Next up is a series that I'm actually sort of sad that I won't be continuing, but it's just never gonna happen, and that is the Children of the Lamp series by P.B. Kerr. This is a middle grade series about two twins who discover they are Jinn, and it was a really, really great series. I only have this first book anymore because I decided a while ago not to finish reading them. I read the first 4 or 5 books in this series and they just kept coming out and I couldn't keep up with it, so unfortunately I won't be continuing on. I will not be continuing forward with the Lorien Legacies series by Pittacus Lore, which is a pen name for James Frey and Joby Hughes, I think are their names. I really liked the first 2 books when I read them in high school, and when I went to reread those first 2 books in preparation for continuing on in the series, I just could not get into them at all and discovered that I really didn't like even the first 2 books, and so I won't be reading the rest of them. I'm not going to continue on with the Jasper Dent series by Barry Lyga, I believe. The first book is I Hunt Killers. This is when I was on my kick trying to find a really good sociopathic main character to read about, and no one could do it the way I wanted them to. This was one of those books, and after reading the first book, which I did not like at all, I decided not to continue forward reading them. I'm not going to be continuing the Birthmarked trilogy by Crag M. O'Brien, I think. I do not know how to say her name. I read these first 2 books in this dystopian series a few years ago, and while I liked them, I don't think that they were memorable enough for me to go and pick up the 3rd book in the series. I am not going to be finishing the Maximum Ride series by James Patterson. I dedicated so much of my time in high school to reading this series, but I felt like as the series went on, the books got progressively worse, especially with the final book that I read, which I think was the second to last book. I was so frustrated by the content and by the way that it ended that I just decided no matter how many more books James Patterson wrote in that series, I was not going to do it. And I've stayed dedicated. I think there's one more that I haven't read, and I'm not gonna do it. I have decided not to continue reading the Kingdom Keepers series by Ridley Pearson. This had a very interesting premise and is a middle grade book that I think, as a person who is no longer in middle grade, cannot enjoy. I don't think it was very well written, unfortunately, for a concept that I sort of enjoyed, and so I just decided I was not going to pick up any of the rest. The same rationale goes for the Drift House series by Dale Peck. I read the first 2 books in this series, and again, cool premise, not written well enough for me to want to keep reading. As a middle grade book, I feel like it has to be a higher quality middle grade series for me to want to continue reading it as a 20-year-old person. It just is going to have to impress me more if I want to continue on reading them. Now for one of the ones I feel like I might get in a tiny bit of trouble for. I am not going to finish reading his Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I read the first 2 books in this series, and I just could not get into them at all, and I read them right around the time that the 3rd book, The Amber Spyglass, came out, and just decided that after not enjoying the first 2 books and after having to drag myself through them, it wasn't going to be worth it to also go and try to get through the Amber Spyglass. I'm not going to continue reading Virals by Kathy Reichs, I believe. She is the woman who writes the series that Bones the television show is based on, and this was her young adult series, and the first book was really fast-paced, but not good enough for me to continue. Now for another zombie series that I won't be continuing in, The Forest of Hands and Teeth by Carrie Ryan. I did not like this book at all. I could not get into it, I did not enjoy it, and I won't be picking up any more of them. Next, the Septimus Heap series by Angie Sage. It makes me really sad that I'm not going to continue in this series, because I know if I had discovered it a few years earlier in my life, I definitely would have continued forward. I read the first 2 books, and they were really good, very, very good middle grade high fantasy books, but it was very much aimed at a middle grade audience, and I could not get into the series, which makes me sad, but I won't be continuing to read the Far World series by J. Scott Savage, just not a good book. Not a good book at all. Unfortunately, I also gave up in the Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel series by Michael Scott. I loved this series in junior high. I read the first 3 books, and then I bought the 4th and the 5th, and I was so excited to reread them, and then over winter break, I tried to read them and just discovered that it was not my thing anymore, and I got rid of all of the books because I just didn't have the urge to read them anymore, and I did not enjoy them the way I used to. I won't be continuing to read the Pillage series by Obert Sky. This was an interesting series that I read shortly after reading Levin Thumps, which is also by Obert Sky, and I wanted to read more by him. And this was his Dragon series, and it was not very good, and I just gave up. From years ago, I gave up. It's just not gonna happen. I'm not going to finish reading the mysterious Benedict Society series by Trenton Lee Stewart. I have read and loved the first 2 books in this series, and I recommend them to a lot of people, but I don't think you really need to keep reading the series, and I just decided for myself that I am perfectly happy with the first 2 books, and I don't need to read any of the rest. Alright, it's time for the one that's gonna get me in the most trouble. I am not going to be finishing reading The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. I know, as a person who loves books, how could I not finish this series? I've read The Hobbit, and I really loved The Hobbit, but the actual Lord of the Rings series, I could not read. I read the first 2 books, and it took me months to read them, and I did not enjoy the experience at all, and so after a lot of hard decision making, I decided Return of the King just wasn't going to happen. I'm sorry, I know. I love The Hobbit, and I love the movies, and I'm afraid that that's the best it's going to get. I am never going to finish the Uglies series by Scott Westerfeld, but not because I don't like Uglies. Uglies, Pretties, and Specials are great, great books. In fact, I think Specials had a perfect ending, which is exactly why I refuse to ever read extras. I am not going to continue reading the Frontier Magic series by Patricia C. Reed. The first book is The 13th Child, and I read this book and I hated it, and so not gonna happen. I'm not going to continue reading the Alfred Kropp series by Rick Yancey. I just didn't enjoy the first book, so not gonna happen. I'm not going to continue on in the Cemetery of Forgotten Books by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I read this first book, and I liked it, and I think that it's a nice book, and I know that there are 2 others, but I didn't enjoy it enough to continue on in a series, and I think that it's perfectly fine as a standalone. I'm not going to be reading the second book in the If I Stay duology. Again, I really loved If I Stay, but after what I've heard about where she went, I've decided I'm just going to leave it at this. I'm not going to finish reading the Chronicles of Nick by Sherilyn Kenyon. I did not like the first book, Infinity, at all, and so that's just not going to happen. Another James Patterson series I am not going to finish is Witch and Wizard by James Patterson. This was when I was really into reading Maximum Ride, and I decided I would give other James Patterson series a try. I read a few of them at the time, but Witch and Wizard just is not going to happen, ever. Sorry, James Patterson, you and I are not on good terms right now. I am not going to finish reading the Cecilia and Kate series by Patricia C. Reed and Caroline Stevermer? Wow, I just butchered that whole thing. This first book, Sorcery and Cecilia, or The Enchanted Chocolate Pot, was given to me because my name is Cecilia. Not spelled the same, but it is. And I really liked it after a couple of times trying to read it, and then I tried to read the second book and it just didn't happen, so I will always keep this first book because I do really love it, but I won't be finishing the series. And finally, I will not be finishing Brian's Saga by Gary Paulson. Hatchet is an incredible book that I read when I was in 6th grade, I think, and I loved it, and I read the second book and I liked it, and I just decided nah, we're just gonna keep Hatchet and leave it at that. So there you go. Those are the series that I won't be finishing. I know a couple of those are going to possibly upset people. I'm sorry, but I finally just decided in my life that I don't want to put myself through reading books that I don't enjoy reading. Putting down books has been a more recent thing for me, but putting down series is something that I've done for a long time. So those are the books that I'm not going to be finishing. If one of these makes you really upset, I'm sorry. You can yell at me in comments. I don't know how much it'll change things, but sorry. If you have decided to put down any of these series as well, let me know. Solidarity. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully sometime soon I will be doing the final video in this series of series that I would like to finish at some point. But until then, I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!